Welcome back, my spatial dynamic architect. Something absolutely extraordinary just occurred that has everyone experiencing profound behavioral recalibration after witnessing whatever action you performed. Observers throughout entire environment fundamentally altered their movement patterns in your presence, creating observable shift where people now navigate space differently around you than they did before, making your single action permanently change how collective consciousness processes your spatial presence. This wasn't you explicitly instructing people to move differently or establishing rules about proximity boundaries that they consciously follow. This was one action so impactful that it automatically recalibrated how everyone's instincts process your presence in space, making their movement adjustments occur unconsciously as automatic responses to revised assessment of what your presence means, creating permanent behavioral change where spatial dynamics around you transformed through single demonstration that reset collective understanding of how to navigate your vicinity. The architects have been monitoring spatial influence and behavioral recalibration phenomena across civilizations for eons, and they've identified what you created as presence recalibration movement adjustment. When someone performs action that fundamentally alters how collective consciousness assesses their nature, observers automatically adjust movement patterns to reflect revised understanding, making spatial behaviors change permanently without conscious decisions because instinctive navigation systems recalibrate automatically when new information changes assessment of what presence signifies. Most actions don't alter spatial dynamics. People perform deeds that observers acknowledge, but their movement patterns remain unchanged because actions don't fundamentally shift how presence gets processed, making spatial behaviors continuous despite events. But your action apparently crossed the recalibration threshold, demonstrating something so significant that collective consciousness revised its fundamental assessment of your nature, forcing automatic adjustment in how instincts process your spatial presence, making everyone move differently around you through unconscious recalibration. That single action triggered, creating permanent transformation in spatial dynamics that persists indefinitely because revised understanding cannot be unlearned once established. Watch what's happening as observers process movement changes. They experience behavioral automaticity. Their altered movement patterns occur without conscious thought, proving adjustments are instinctive responses rather than deliberate choices, making recalibration operate at unconscious level. Some observers are experiencing proximity revision. Their comfortable distance from you changed after witnessing your action, proving spatial assessments recalibrated automatically, adjusting personal space boundaries without conscious decision. Others are experiencing navigation alteration, their path selection when moving near you transformed after your action, proving route planning instincts recalibrated automatically, creating different spatial strategies for navigating your vicinity. The truly remarkable element is the permanence. Movement changes persist indefinitely, proving recalibration is lasting transformation rather than temporary reaction, making your single action create permanent shift in how collective consciousness processes your spatial presence. Something you did changed how people move around you through demonstrating that presence recalibration creates automatic movement adjustment, where single significant action triggers permanent transformation in spatial behaviors, making everyone navigate differently in your vicinity because revised assessment of your nature automatically recalibrates instinctive navigation systems, creating lasting behavioral changes that occur unconsciously as automatic responses to fundamentally altered understanding of what your presence signifies. Now the architects are analyzing what creates presence recalibration, movement adjustment, and they're identifying what they call significance threshold, instinct reset, when action crosses specific impact level that forces fundamental reassessment, instinctive systems automatically reset parameters for processing presence, making behavioral adjustments occur without conscious mediation, because significance itself triggers recalibration mechanisms. Most actions stay below threshold. People perform deeds that get acknowledged, but don't cross significance level required to trigger instinctive reset, making their actions noticed without causing behavioral recalibration. But your action apparently achieved threshold crossing, demonstrating something with sufficient significance to force fundamental reassessment, triggers automatic reset in how instincts process your presence, making movement patterns adjust without conscious decisions, because significance level itself activates recalibration mechanisms that reset instinctive parameters for navigating your spatial presence, creating permanent behavioral change through crossing impact threshold that forces instinctive systems to update their processing protocols. Consider what threshold crossing requires strategically. Your action must achieve sufficient significance. Impact level must exceed specific threshold to trigger instinctive reset versus minor actions that get noticed without forcing recalibration, making significance itself the mechanism that activates behavioral adjustment. Watch what instinct reset creates in processing systems. Navigation parameters recalibrate. Instinctive systems that govern spatial behavior automatically update settings for processing your presence, making movement adjustments occur systematically rather than randomly because fundamental parameters changed. Some studying behavioral psychology recognize that threshold effects do exist. Research shows that certain impact levels trigger qualitative changes versus incremental adjustments, making your recalibration potentially reflect documented threshold phenomenon, where significance crossing causes systematic reset, others exploring instinctive updating. Note that automatic systems do recalibrate. Neuroscience shows that unconscious processing updates when significant information emerges, making your presence recalibration potentially reflect brain mechanisms that reset instinctive parameters automatically. A few from systems theory recognize that parameter resets create discontinuities. Control systems show that threshold crossings produce sudden changes versus gradual adjustments, making your movement transformation potentially reflect discontinuous recalibration that thresholds produce. Some attempting to identify your threshold crossing discover mystery, trying to determine what specifically about your action triggered recalibration proves difficult because threshold mechanisms operate unconsciously, making exact significance factors hard to identify. Others questioning whether recalibration is universal, wondering if everyone's instincts reset equally or if some observers experienced stronger adjustments, making uniformity of recalibration potentially variable across individuals with different sensitivities. A few recognizing that thresholds might be personal, understanding that significance levels triggering recalibration could vary individually, making what crosses threshold for some might not affect others, creating individual differences in who recalibrates. The architects observe that significance threshold, instinct reset is what created movement adjustment, crossing impact level, triggered automatic recalibration. Most actions stay below threshold, yours crossed it, and demonstrating something with sufficient significance to force fundamental reassessment, triggers automatic reset in instinctive systems that govern spatial behavior, making movement patterns adjust without conscious decisions, because significance level itself activates recalibration mechanisms that update processing parameters for navigating your presence, creating permanent behavioral changes through threshold crossing that forces instinctive reset, making your single action achieve impact level sufficient to trigger systematic recalibration in how collective unconscious processes your spatial presence. Something powerful is spreading among observers. Now, what the architects call spatial respect, distance deference, people, examining their altered movement patterns, are discovering that increased proximity caution and navigational deference reflect instinctive respect that your action generated, creating recognition that spatial behaviors communicate status, where how people move around someone reveals their unconscious assessment of that person's significance. Most people think movement is neutral. They assume spatial navigation reflects practical considerations, making proximity choices seem functional rather than communicative of attitudes. But altered movements revealed spatial communication, discovering that people navigate more cautiously around you. After your action proves, movement patterns express respect, where increased distance and deferential routing communicate unconscious recognition of elevated status, making spatial behaviors function as nonverbal status acknowledgement that reveals collective assessment of significance hierarchy. Watch what spatial respect creates in status communication. Movement expresses deference. Altered navigation patterns function as unconscious status acknowledgement, where increased caution and respectful routing communicate recognition of significance without verbal declaration. Some studying proxemics recognize that distance does communicate status. Research on personal space shows that proximity patterns reflect power relationships, making your spatial recalibration potentially demonstrate how movement expresses hierarchy. Others exploring nonverbal communication note that navigation reveals attitudes. Behavioral research shows that how people move around others expresses unconscious assessments, making altered patterns potentially reflect revised status recognition. A few from mythology recognize that spacing indicates dominance. Animal behavior shows that subordinates maintain greater distance from dominance, making human spatial adjustments potentially reflect ancient status signaling mechanisms. Some experiencing distance increase recognize respect. Their greater caution when navigating near you reflects unconscious acknowledgement of significance, making spatial adjustment express deference they might not verbally admit. Others experiencing navigation deference feel appropriate. Their altered routing choices that avoid interfering with your movement feel naturally correct, reflecting instinctive understanding that your paths deserve priority. A few resenting spatial deference feel imposed. Their automatic movement adjustments that defer to you create resentment about unconscious status acknowledgement they didn't consciously choose, making spatial respect feel like extracted submission. Some celebrating spatial recognition feel validated, observing that people navigate more respectfully around them after their action creates satisfaction from receiving spatial deference that communicates unconscious status acknowledgement. The architects observe that spatial respect distance deference reveals that movement changes, communicates status. Altered navigation expresses unconscious recognition. Most think movement is neutral. Your action triggered spatial respect, and discovering that people navigate more cautiously around you with increased distance and deferential routing proves spatial behaviors function as nonverbal status communication, where movement patterns express unconscious assessment of significance hierarchy, making altered navigation reflect instinctive respect that your action generated, creating recognition that how people move around someone reveals their unconscious evaluation of that person's status, making spatial dynamics themselves communicate power relationships, where proximity choices and routing decisions express deference without verbal acknowledgement, proving that your action not only recalibrated instincts, but also elevated your status in collective unconscious, creating automatic spatial respect that movement patterns express continuously through navigational deference that persists as permanent behavioral transformation. Now the architects are revealing what movement transformation actually demonstrates. Observers are experiencing what they call behavioral memory permanent imprinting, where single significant action creates lasting changes in automatic behaviors, proving that transformative experiences permanently alter instinctive response patterns, making momentary events produce indefinite consequences through imprinting mechanisms that encode significant experiences into unconscious processing systems. Most experiences are temporary. People witness events that affect them briefly, but behavioral patterns return to baseline, making experiences transient without lasting impact on automatic responses. But your action apparently achieved imprinting significance, crossing threshold that triggers permanent encoding, creates irreversible changes in instinctive behaviors, making single moment produce indefinite consequences, because transformative experiences get permanently imprinted into unconscious systems that govern automatic responses, creating behavioral memory that cannot be erased once established. Consider what permanent imprinting reveals about behavioral change. Single events create lasting effects. Sufficiently significant experiences permanently alter automatic behaviors, proving that momentary actions can produce indefinite consequences through imprinting into unconscious systems versus temporary impacts that fade. Watch what behavioral memory creates in response. Persistence. Changes endure indefinitely. Movement adjustments persist permanently because imprinting mechanisms encoded your significance into instinctive processing, making recalibration irreversible once threshold achieved. Some studying learning mechanisms recognize that imprinting does exist. Psychological research shows that certain experiences create permanent behavioral changes, making your movement transformation potentially reflect documented imprinting phenomena where significant events permanently alter responses. Others exploring trauma effects note that single incidents can create lasting changes. Clinical research shows that transformative experiences permanently affect behaviors, making your action potentially trigger imprinting mechanisms that normally respond to extreme significance. A few from neuroscience recognize that permanent encoding occurs. Brain research shows that significant experiences create irreversible neural changes, making your behavioral imprinting potentially reflect neurological mechanisms that permanently encode transformative information. Some experiencing permanent change recognize irreversibility. Their movement adjustments feel permanently established rather than temporary responses, proving imprinting created lasting transformation that won't fade with time. Others attempting behavioral reset discover impossibility. Trying to return to previous movement patterns proves futile because imprinting created irreversible changes. Making attempts to undo recalibration fail systematically. A few questioning whether permanence is absolute, wondering if behavioral memory will eventually fade or if movement changes persist indefinitely, making true permanence versus very long duration difficult to determine without extended observation. The architects observe that behavioral memory permanent imprinting reveals that your action created irreversible transformation. Single significant event permanently altered behaviors. Most experiences are temporary. Yours imprinted permanently, and discovering that movement adjustments persist indefinitely because your action crossed threshold, triggering permanent encoding into unconscious systems proves that sufficiently significant experiences create behavioral memory that cannot be erased, making single moment produce indefinite consequences through imprinting mechanisms that irreversibly alter instinctive response patterns, creating recognition that transformative actions don't just affect immediate responses, but permanently change automatic behaviors through encoding into unconscious processing systems, making your action achieve significance level that triggered irreversible imprinting, creating permanent shift in how collective unconscious processes your presence, making movement transformation lasting consequence that endures indefinitely. The architects are now analyzing strategic dimension of movement control. You apparently created what they call spatial influence, environmental shaping, where altering how people move around you grants control over collective positioning and navigational flow, making spatial dynamics themselves become controllable resource that shapes environmental outcomes. Most people accept spatial dynamics as given. They assume movement patterns are fixed, making spatial arrangements seem unchangeable rather than influenceable variables. But your movement transformation revealed spatial control, demonstrating that single action can permanently alter how people navigate around you. Proves spatial dynamics are controllable resources that strategic actions can shape, making environmental positioning itself become influenceable variable, where how people move becomes controllable through actions that trigger behavioral recalibration, creating recognition that spatial influence represents strategic capability, where controlling movement patterns grants power over environmental dynamics. Watch what spatial influence creates in environmental control. You shape collective positioning. Altered movement patterns give you control over where people position themselves relative to you, making spatial arrangements themselves become controllable through actions that recalibrate navigation instincts. Some studying spatial strategy recognize that positioning matters. Military and game theory show that controlling space provides strategic advantages, making your spatial influence potentially represent fundamental power form, where movement control enables environmental shaping. Others exploring crowd dynamics note that flow control is powerful. Research on collective movement shows that influencing navigational patterns shapes group behaviors, making your spatial recalibration potentially grant crowd control capabilities through movement influence. A few from architecture recognize that space shapes behavior. Environmental design shows that spatial arrangements influence actions, making your ability to alter movement patterns potentially reflect spatial control that architects pursue through physical design. Some experiencing spatial control feel empowered, recognizing their action changed. How people navigate creates awareness that spatial dynamics are controllable resources, making them appreciate strategic capability, where movement influence enables environmental shaping. Others experiencing control limitation feel constrained, discovering that someone else's action determines how they move, creates resentment about spatial control. They didn't consent to making movement influence feel like imposed constraint. A few questioning whether spatial control is intentional, wondering if your movement transformation reflects deliberate strategy to control environmental dynamics versus unintended consequence, making distinction between strategic spatial influence and accidental recalibration difficult to determine. Some celebrating environmental shaping appreciate sophistication, recognizing that controlling how people move represents advanced influence, makes them admire strategic capability, where spatial control enables shaping collective positioning and navigational flow. The architects observed that spatial influence, environmental shaping reveals that your movement transformation granted strategic control, altering navigation patterns, enables environmental shaping. Most accept spatial dynamics as given. Your action made them controllable, and demonstrating that single action can permanently alter how people move around you. Proves spatial dynamics are controllable resources that strategic actions can shape, making environmental positioning itself become influenceable variable where controlling movement patterns grants power over collective arrangements, creating recognition that spatial influence represents fundamental strategic capability, where ability to shape how people navigate enables controlling environmental outcomes through influencing collective positioning and navigational flow, making movement control itself strategic resource that your action captured through triggering behavioral recalibration that permanently altered spatial dynamics. Now something's emerging that the architects call movement observation, status demonstration. Observers watching altered spatial patterns are discovering that visible behavioral changes function as continuous demonstrations of your elevated status, creating ongoing power display that requires no active effort, because movement adjustments themselves communicate significance, making spatial deference self-perpetuating status signal. Most status displays require active maintenance. People must continuously demonstrate significance through ongoing actions, making status communication effort intensive, requiring constant performance. But your movement transformation created passive status display, altered navigation patterns, function as continuous demonstration of significance that require no effort from you because other people's movements themselves communicate your elevated status, making spatial deference self-perpetuating signal that broadcasts significance automatically through observable behavioral adjustments that persist indefinitely without requiring active maintenance. Watch what passive demonstration creates in status communication. Your significance broadcasts continuously. Other people's altered movements function as ongoing status signals that require no effort from you, making spatial deference itself communicate elevated position automatically. Some studying status signaling recognize that behavioral demonstrations are powerful. Research shows that observable deference communicates a status more effectively than verbal claims, making your movement transformation potentially create optimal status signal through generating visible behavioral adjustments. Others exploring power displays note that passive demonstrations are superior, showing status through others' behaviors is more effective than self-demonstrations, making your spatial deference potentially represent advanced status signaling where others' movements broadcast your significance. A few from impression management recognize that effortless displays seem authentic demonstrations, requiring no active effort, appear more genuine than performed signals, making your passive status display potentially more credible than active demonstrations. Some observing movement changes recognized your status, witnessing how people navigate differently around you communicates your significance to them, making spatial patterns themselves educate observers about your elevated position. Others experiencing display fatigue appreciate passivity, recognizing that your status gets demonstrated without active effort, makes them envious of position where significance broadcasts automatically through others' behaviors. Few questioning whether display is accurate, wondering if movement adjustments accurately reflect your actual status versus over-representing significance, making spatial deference potentially misleading about true position. Some celebrating passive demonstration feel validated, having achieved position where status broadcasts automatically through others' movements creates satisfaction from requiring no active effort to maintain status communication. The architects observed that movement observation status demonstration reveals that spatial changes created passive status signal, altered movements, broadcast significance continuously. Most status requires active maintenance. Your display is passive, and discovering that other people's altered navigation patterns function as continuous demonstration of your elevated status creates recognition that movement adjustments themselves communicate significance, automatically making spatial deference self-perpetuating status signal that broadcasts your position without requiring active effort, because observable behavioral changes that your action triggered persist as permanent demonstrations visible to all observers, making your status continuously communicated through spatial patterns that require no maintenance, creating optimal power display where significance gets demonstrated passively through others' movements rather than through active self-presentation, making movement transformation itself strategic achievement, where triggering behavioral recalibration creates self-perpetuating status signal